Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session Becoming the Catalyst of Change in Policy and Governance. Youth for India is hosting a series of sessions to respond to many applicants who wish to know more about the fellowship journey and also the opportunities post fellowship. We get a lot of questions from applicants in the domain of policy and governance. So, most common questions that we have been receiving past few days is like, can we work on a project that demands policy work, working at policy level? What happens to projects after fellowship? And are fellows able to contribute at a policy level? There are a lot of questions that people are seeking answers to, and to respond to a few crucial ones that we think it will help you to understand the journey and also to understand the scope of becoming a catalyst in the change of policy and governance. We have invited two fellows of SBI Youth for India from 2015 and 16 batch to share their expertise, experience, and insights on their fellowship journey and also experience in policy and governance, and how fellowship directed them towards pursuing a career in policy and governance. So, I would like to welcome Nupur, who is Senior Associate at JPAL and works with central government on capacity building of officials, and Varun, who is a Senior Fellow at Government of Telangana. Varun leads a team of 10 assistant statistical officers and fellows on reform projects related with public finance, mines and geology, and Telangana social welfare and tribal welfare residential societies. So, before we begin the discussion, I think it would be great if Varun and Nupur, you both could share about your journey of fellowship. And Nupur, I would like you to start and tell us what motivated you to join the fellowship at the first place.
So I was at that time. First of all, for me, it's like 8 years ago, so it's a long time ago. But I was at that time looking to enter into the development sector, the social development sector, and I wanted to start at the absolute grassroots. And so that was my primary motivation. I had heard Shubhajit, who was from batch before me, speak about the fellowship, and I found it quite interesting and also a great opportunity to learn about the grassroots. So that was my primary.
Okay. Varun, I would like to ask the same question to you. What motivated you to be at the fellowship first?
Hmm. So I think Roopa, I was a unique candidate in that sense because I had taken a gap year from my masters, and my prime motivation of joining the fellowship was to actually test what I was learning in the university at the time. So I had a strong feeling that in a humanities and liberal arts course you end up learning a lot of ideals and benchmarking yourself and benchmarking the sector, etc. And I was feeling that it's not possible to implement it at the grassroots. So my purpose was to actually test and see if it works or not, and if it works, then whether it can be scaled or not. So I think in that sense, my fellowship year was pretty successful, and my purpose was quite fulfilled.
Oh, that's great. I think everyone has their own motivation. For me, my motivation was just to go and explore social sector because I was not in social sector. I was in profit sector. So I just wanted to be there to explore and maybe just make a career. So I was like very determined to have a career in social sector. And that was one of the reason that I joined fellowship, thankfully. So going forward, I think thanks so much for sharing your experience first. And I also believe that SBI Youth for India has open gateway for many of us. We all have a different motivation, and it has open gateway for everyone who wants to explore social sector, who wants to work and make a career in different segments of social sector. And especially thinking of change through policy and governance, I think is another level, and it could bring change statewide and also nationwide. So like I have sort of certain questions for both of you, and I would like again for Nupur to answer my first question. How did your fellowship journey direct you towards policy and governance?
I think that's a really interesting question, Rupa, because I feel like there is definitely a more specific answer, which could be more to do with the skills and so forth. But I'd like to take a more sort of broad-based, zoomed out approach to this question. I would say that when you're trying to work in the development space as a whole, whether you work in policy or whether you work with the government, for the government, in the government, etc. I just feel like there is, of course, a bunch of like analytical hard skills that you might need if you're working with data specifically, or if, generally speaking, there'll be some hard skills. There'll be some communication soft skills that you'll obviously require to work with the government. But I think there's also a mindset that you need when you're entering this space. And I feel like a lot of that mindset, at least personally for me, and I know that this is a shared experience of a lot of fellows that I have interacted with. The beginning of that, the construction of that mindset happened for me during the fellowship, which is listen first, don't be prescriptive, try and be immersive as much as possible. And I think one very critical one was just matching the pace of change. I feel like so much of the interaction that we have now with different products and services, there's a lot of instant gratification, and you expect that. When you're working at work as well. But I guess the way social change happens is a lot slower. You require a certain level of patience. You also require a certain understanding of the system to be able to manage your expectations. And I remember something that my mentor said back then to me. He said, and he's now the CEO of Seva Mandir. So I was with Seva Mandir, and Ronak Ji is now the CEO of Seva Mandir. And he said, Nupur, if you're getting frustrated with the paperwork, try and understand what is happening. That is making it so slow. And I feel like that's really stuck with me. I feel like it's really useful even today in my job in the policy space, where if I get frustrated with something, if I'm not comfortable with something, I try to understand why it is that way, and it really helps me manage my expectations. So I feel like that mindset that the fellowship gave me, it plays a huge role in how I function even today. And it's really helped me kind of understand how things function in this sector. So I think there's that. And then, of course, there's a bigger piece of just understanding the space, understanding the complexity of change, understanding the complexity of governance, of how the state works, demystification of like the black box, which is the state, right? Like, how does the government actually function, things like that. I think definitely all of that started for me with the fellowship, and then continued onward with the experiences that I had post the fellowship as well. So that would be the big contribution that the fellowship had in my journey towards working in policy and government.
Okay, that was nice. That was nice. So, like Varun, if you have something, you can also add. Like, I don't want these questions to be specific, but I think like looking at your backgrounds and your experience, I just thought that I will ask this question to you. But if you have something that you think has made you choose this journey, use this career in policy and governance, you can add here, Varun.
So I think I resonate with the what Nupur is suggesting. Though of course both our journeys have been so unique and different. So for example, in my case, I think policy was something that I never thought of when I had begun my journey. I didn't think it as a linear journey where I would one day work at the policy level, or one day I'll work on governance. I think it for me it were dots that kept connecting, right? So after every experience that I went through, I reflected and sort of course corrected my trajectory every time. Uh, so for me, working at the policy and governance level makes sense only when I have slogged at the grassroots, where I have a certain amount of understanding of why are things the way they are, right? So for example, my mode of operation is how can I shift within the institutions the focus from being process centric to a process which is people centric, right? Where the policy is not driven by the fundamental lack of trust, but by the fundamental principle of how can you trust. So this is where this is how I see my work and my engagement at the policy and governance level.
Oh, that was lovely. So, my second question to you only is, if you can briefly talk about your fellowship project, and whether the fellowship experience adds value to your current role with the government.
Uh, so as part of my project, I'd worked in one of the hamlets in Coimbatore Gram Panchayat in Gajpati district of Odisha. My partner organization was Gram Vikas. Uh, so in this village, the access was a major challenge. This village was on the top of a hill, and there was no way of you reaching. There was no motorable path. You had to walk. The village had no electricity. There were around 45 children who were out of school, enrolled but out of school. There's no functioning school in the village. So I think so. Where I started was to I learned the language myself, and I was trying to teach myself. But I think after almost a period of around 1.5 months, 2 months, I realized that probably I'll end up teaching for an year and nothing would change. I would be out and nothing would change. So I shifted gradually, my focus towards bringing a sustainable solution. So we did a lot of advocacy. We petitioned the district administration, the block office, etc., and we got a local permanent teacher back to our village, and that's how the school became functional in the community hall. And then I focused on bringing electricity. So carrying cement concrete pillars 8 kilometers uphill was not possible. People had died in the past trying to do that. We worked on an alternative energy setup where individual household level solar power setups were installed. But again, my focus was not just to, let's say, create infrastructure. The focus was also to co-create it and do it collectively. Uh, so in that sense, at the end of 1 year, the entire village was electrified. The school had become functional in the community hall. And then I think so. Fellowship also envisions projects to be handheld by the successive batches. If there are projects that could not be completed in 1 year and have a deep rooted problem. So my project in that sense was fortunate enough. So the incoming fellow had taken over my project, and in the next year the school's building was also constructed. So this is how. But again, to your question, Rupa, whether it helps in policy and governance, it definitely does. So during that entire process, I had a deep peek into the psyche of a community, psyche of a marginalized community. What stops a community from finding solution? What prevents the bureaucracy? What prevents the decision makers to plan and have evidence-driven solutions implemented at the grassroots? At the same time, I think the nexus of executive, the community, and the Panchayati Raj institutions was something that I got to work on hands-on. So how does this how does this what do I say? How does this collaborative can function, and what stops it from functioning in tandem is something that I learned. So whenever I sit on a table today, that experience always comes back to me, where I know what are the issues of a ward member, where I know what are the issues of an SHG, where I know what are the issues of when we say that public health is not accessible, or let's say when we say that the country is 100% electrified, but not at the household level, but by the definition of electrification. Right? So this was the time when I had known that the definition of electrification is different, and when reaching out to each household is different. So
Thanks. Again, coming back to you, Nupur, what do you think on how do projects undertaken by the fellows can act as a catalyst in bringing change on a policy level? If you have some examples, you can talk about it.
Sure. So personally, my project was to do with alternate energy, and then I also spent some time working on marketing of agricultural produce because there was some downtime in my fellowship, so I used that to basically help with the social enterprise that I was working with, which was a pharma company. But so what I'm trying to say is that my interface was not that much with policy and governance while I was a fellow. But I know that the fellowship enables interface with the people, the state, and the market. Right? When you're in that particular community, you obviously have a directly immersive experience with the community itself, but there's also a very, very close experience with the local governance bodies. And in fact, all of us are initially, we are encouraged to carry out interviews with the local stakeholders of the government. And that kind of gives you a very good understanding of what Varun was also saying right now, right? Like, what is the psyche of the decision maker? And so that is to say that that interface of being sort of familiar with the people who are decision makers and are in charge of local governance has been leveraged by a lot of fellows to be able to streamline processes, make local communities more aware of their of what is owed to them by the government. And in fact, Rupa, I should probably turn this whole thing onto you, because I believe you worked on a project like that where you worked with bringing identity cards to rural tribal communities, if I'm not wrong, right? So I think you would be, and your story would be a great example of such a change that was made. But time and again, we've seen basically that in two areas of streamlining processes that already exist, and also making local communities more aware of what is it that is owed to them in some sense, right? I think that's something that the fellows really have worked on, and so there is enough opportunity to be able to make some sort of a dent in that space.
Sure. Thanks, Nupur. Um, I do believe, like when you talked about the project thing, I think I do believe that sometimes certain things that we don't realize is going to make a change or bring a great change at policy level, but how a small thing like caste certificate was not handled properly, was not uh, given proper care, or maybe you can say that there was a lack of awareness at district level or state level, which because of which there were a lot of people who were suffering, and they were not identified as a tribe, and we're not able to seek benefit out of it. So a lot of things can be done. Usually we ignore that, okay, it's just a caste certificate, we can just ignore. But when we see the um, layers of what do we say, demerits that they are facing, or something that they are lacking, which is far greater than what we could imagine. And when we give it to them, that happiness is also something which makes us always proud that we have done something, and we have brought a change at policy level, at government level. So yeah, thanks for bringing that and just reminding me of my own fellowship project. um, okay, from last question for you, Varun. Like, we understand that government works towards finding best solutions for the rural communities. So, do you think that our fellows can collaborate with the government bodies to work towards effective implementation of policies?
So I'm assuming, Rupa, you're talking about post fellowship,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So we have evidences that our alumni have been working very closely, with the government at policy level, at advocacy level. So, for example, one of our first batch fellows, Simranjit Singh, he leads an organization that works in the energy space, and he's working with multiple governments on, devising, helping them devise policies which are more climate friendly, which are more environment friendly, which help reduce the carbon footprint, etc. So there are very strong examples like that. But the question is also that I'm hearing you ask is, does the fellowship enable you to take that path? So my understanding is, yes, it does, because uh, when you sit at the state level, you find very few people who have that understanding of first-hand understanding of the grassroots. There are very, very few people. So most people, for example, have had their understanding based on, for example, internships, very short duration field immersion, etc. Right? The fellowship structure by design is such that, yes, it's a fixed duration, but at the same time, what the fellowship demands out of you, out of the context, you end up getting too deep into the context, and the various threads that now I know are directly related with public policy. You probably don't realize it when you are at the grassroots. So yes, so it definitely enables you, and we have evidences in, like I said, in alumni. Nupur is there, Simran is there, and there are many more other people who are working, who have started their own organizations, who are working with multilateral organizations. So yeah.
If I can also weigh in on that a little bit, I think also the access and exposure to the community. So one is, of course, what the fellowship enables just by the core of the fellowship, which is the immersive experience and so one is that, but also the community of fellows that has now been growing for the last 9 or so years, right? Like I think, or 10 years actually. I think the fellowship hit 10 years. So that community of fellows, so it really kind of helps to know what different people are doing, and that kind of access definitely allows new entrants to kind of path that chart out their career path, figure out what is that you do in different elements or different aspects of the social development sector. I think that's a really useful sort of value add as well of the fellowship.
Sure, Nupur, thanks. So, I would like you all to know that this time we have received, uh, we have received so many applications, and most of the people have mentioned about how they want to go ahead in policy and governance as a career after this fellowship. They want to seek knowledge from this fellowship, and learn like how they can work. So certain kind of knowledge seeking element has been visible in the applications and also interest of the applicants. Do you think that fellowship is able to provide that knowledge seeking element for applicants, where people can understand, okay, I am working in this? Because I remember you both talked about different projects that you have been talking, and I also remember what you told, how your fellowship experience directed you towards policy and governance. But what are some knowledge seeking elements, if you have in mind, you think people can gain, or if applicants do this kind of process, they will get some input on how to work with policy and governance? Do they have to necessarily work with the government, or do you think they can work with maybe in health sector or education sector and still get some knowledge on policy and governance? If you have some idea, you can talk about that. And before you respond to it, I would request all the audiences, if you have any questions, please ask them in your comment boxes. After end of this session, we will be responding to all your questions. Yes, over to you.
Varun, would you like to go first, or should I go first?
I think absolutely you go ahead before.
Okay, fair enough. So I think there are three broad ways in which you tend to learn something, right? Which is, one would be from your own peers, one would be what you learn on the job, and one would be what you learn mostly in a classroom setting, right? Some sort of a formal education setup. So I would say the fellowship provides opportunities for the first two. And then the third is completely up to you. You can pick up a book, your fellowship partner, the people you're placed with. So I was at Seva Mandir, and we were given a whole bunch of readings in the beginning to understand the community a little better. Both, like biographical accounts, but also like hardcore literature on like how water management is done and so forth, right? So that is completely up to you. But there is a lot of learning that happens from peers, and there's a lot of learning that happens just by being on the field and understanding. I actually worked on an alternative to fuel wood, and it was a very complicated process, and it required a lot of research, because it's almost like a science project. It's this, like, I had to understand the chemistry of how fuels work, and yes, the fellowship like had its arms wide open for me to go and learn how briquettes work, and this is something that has been implemented in a lot of African countries, had a lot of industrial applications, but had not been kind of implemented in the context of rural communities in India. And so that is something that I got to experiment with, and there was a lot of learning that happened. So that is something very, very specific, but even like more broad-based macro, like policy level issues, is something that you can learn a lot from your the partner that you're placed with, the NGO partner that you're placed with, again from your peers, etc. So I would say there's a lot of opportunity to learn. At the end of the day, you kind of get what you put in. So that's definitely important. Varun.
Yeah. So I think I'll respond to this question from a different approach. One, this fellowship is not a public policy fellowship. It's not a public policy fellowship. Two, but like we're discussing right now, the core fundamentals of the fellowship are very deep rooted into policy and governance issues. You pick anything, so from issues of nutrition to issues of alternative energy to issues of access to rights and entitlements. Everything is deeply rooted into that. At this Having said that, I think fellowship, by design or incidentally, in both ways, it ends up honing your skills around problem solving,
Yeah.
uh, right?
Mhm.
Around so 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 for example, every development process, every policy process is an iterative process. So when you're working on the grassroots, you're forced to iterate and bring out better each day, each month, with the community, with your stakeholders, etc. Right? A process which is used at the policy level every single day. At the same time, I think another core skill set which is very inherent into the fellowship design is that of identification of the problem. How do you define the problem? So many times you end up defining the problem, or you end up identifying a wrong problem. I wouldn't say a wrong problem, let's say an incorrect problem, underlying which there is a bigger problem, right? So the fellowship also sort of hones your skill to go to the root of the problem, even before you think of coming up with a solution or what to do about it. Which are again, I feel, lies at the fundamental of public policy and governance.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Varun. My last question to Nupur, it would be like, I know we have discussed it already in past, but just to so that audience can also hear this, I want to ask you this question again. Do you think now, when you're working in policy and governance, do you think SBI Youth for India can support people who choose policy and governance in any way?
You mean post fellowship?
Yeah, post fellowship. If they go
Yeah.
for policy and governance, do you think we can support?
Yeah, I think I come back to the whole point about having a rather massive and a fairly active alumni community. I think the fact that we're having this conversation is kind of testimony to that, right? Like there's a lot to learn from just each other. I, in my current workspace, have two other Youth for India fellows who I work with. So it just so you're coming into an office and you just bond over the fact that you did the fellowship, and I think that's just a great, like, sort of way to start work, right? Like I mean, I started working at my client's office, and the first person I met over there happened to be a 16, 17 batch person. So that was really useful to me, and to just get comfortable at the workplace. So I think that's just like a very small part of it, but also just generally learning from the community, and learning from what different people are doing, and the ability to just go in and start interacting with people who are working in this space. And it's such a massive sector, right? Like even the policy space, so to say. I mean, you could be talking about anything from climate change to what I'm doing currently, which is capacity building, and women's issues, nutrition and health, etc. There's just a lot that can be sort of tapped in terms of the number of fellows who are working in that space, and the ability for you to just kind of go on a coffee chat with that person and just learn about the sector. I think that's a huge privilege that the fellowship affords the fellows.
Also, I
Okay.
think, adding to what Nupur is suggesting. So if I'm correct, fellowship at this juncture is also trying to support alumni through seed funding, through mentorship support. So this is where the fellowship has reached over the years, right? And I'm sure in the coming years, there, there would be a very well defined ecosystem where even philanthropic support could be envisaged.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
true. Yeah. So thanks. So meanwhile, I have received few questions from audiences. Let me see how much I can respond to. Can a bachelor graduate apply for the fellowship? Yes. Bachelors, married people, both can apply for the fellowship. What will you get after the fellowship? So I think I did not understand what this question exactly means, but it's you get a certificate and also you get to build a community with people. Um, I maybe I can talk more about it, but if you want to understand this question more and to understand technicalities of fellowship, please reach out to us at applications@youthforindia.org. Third question is, should we have to move to a specified area to work under this fellowship? Yes. So you have to choose a organization where you would like to work with, and there you would have to choose a project. So this area is not provided by us. It's you who will be choosing it, which area, which sector you want to work with. There is nothing provided through SBI Youth for India. It's all your choice. How many locations are there and how many fellows will be selected for 22-23 batch? Um, I'm not sure about locations, but it's
It's available on the website, Rupa.
it is available in the website. Thanks, Varun, for that. And we every year we select 100 fellows. Um, okay. So what is seed funding? Varun or Nupur, you want to talk about that? What is seed funding?
Sure, it's the Varun, if you would like to take a stab, I was just going to
No, no,
start with, but
go ahead.
essentially just a certain amount of money that is given to you to start your venture. So if you have a specific social venture, I guess it would be social venture in the case of Youth for India, but if you have a venture in mind, the Youth for India community or the Youth for India Foundation would basically give you a little amount, some amount of capital to get started. That would be something.
Sure. So these are the few questions that we had received till now. Okay, I think we have already talked a lot about, um, and we already had a live session where people had reached out to us with several other questions. And if there are still difficulties in you understanding how to work on applications, if there is some technical difficulty that you're facing while filling up the application form, or any doubt that you have in mind, please reach out to us at applications@youthforindia.org. I think that's all that we have for now. Thanks so much, Varun and Nupur, for joining us. I think it was really lovely talking to you both. And like we all have been alumni of Youth for India, we all have memories, and I think we can start with the building alumni community, like Nupur you have recommended. We can start meeting maybe someday. Um, so again, just a reminder for our audiences again. If you have any issues filling up the applications for stage 1 is closed. Stage 2, if you have any issues, please reach out to us. You have to write an email at applications@theyouthforindia.org. So thank you so much, everyone. Stay tuned to SBI Youth for India social media channels and website for application-related updates and more sessions like this. Thank you for tuning into today's session, and I hope you gained some important insights. Don't forget to leave your comments or connect with us online. This is Roopa Sharma, SBI Alumni Ambassador, signing off. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nupur.
Thanks, Varun.